So hello everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling from. I'm Elina Ng Boyd, and I am the founder and director of the Changemaker Institute. Hey Colin, it's good to see you. So I wanted to invite you, welcome you to the event. We are going to be talking about intellectual property as a revenue generating strategy. A brief introduction to who we are as the Changemaker Institute, and then I'm going to reserve like maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the end to tell you more about who we are. But basically, we are a social enterprise. We are incorporated as a benefit corporation, and our mission is to build a community around social impact issues. And to that end, we are running a series of summer events, roundtable, where we discuss things that are pressing to social enterprises. So I see some really good friends. Christoph is here. Hi, Lucienne. Hi, Claudia. It's good to see all of you. So I'm going to share my screen so that you could get an overview of what we're going to be doing today. We are going to be, I'm going to have some preliminary remarks, and my plan is to keep that really short so that we can have a discussion about some of the things that you are thinking about. And then, like I say, reserve maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the session just to give you, let you know what we have planned now that we are coming towards the end of the summer series. Okay, so let me share my slides. Here. Okay. So I learned this from a really good friend of mine, Lisa. So when she has events, she always starts it by getting us to set our intention. So I'm going to just take 30 seconds so that we, sometimes we're running from one meeting to another. So we're just trying to calm our minds and set our intention. And my wish is that each one of you will find what you're looking for in this 1 hour, right? So you might be coming to this event with a roundtable with questions that you might have, and that you would hear what you need to hear in this hour. Okay, so let's just take 10 seconds to calm our minds. Okay, and so just to mention, when we were having this roundtable, this is the let me see, the fifth one that we are having, and I never mentioned this in the previous roundtables, but I think I should mention this now that more people are attending, especially in this roundtable where we're going to be talking about IP. It goes without saying, so you do not disclose anything that is not public information, just to be really careful. And also, as a disclaimer, nothing that's said here is legal or financial advice, right? So this is just a roundtable to brainstorm and find solutions to more general questions that you may have, right? Okay. So having said that, the event is the roundtable is focused on the 4 basic types of IP, right? So patents, which protects as a general rule inventions, copyright, which protects literary and artistic works, and then trademarks, which protect brand and market identity, right? And your patents, copyright, and trademarks, that's protected by the federal system. And then, of course, trade secrets, that would be confidential information that is protected by state level, right? So these are the 4 basic types of IP that we will look at. Of course, there are more I guess state-related or state-protected IP, like California is huge on protecting celebrity images, right? So publicity rights would be also a type of IP. And some states also protect basic ideas, right? That do not qualify for one of this federally protected IP, right? But we're going to set those different types of IP aside and focus on the 4 main types of IP, right? Patents, copyright, trademarks, and trade secrets. right? And the one thing that I wanted to emphasize in this roundtable is to get everyone here to start thinking of IP not as a legal document, or not something that you would acquire as an end, right? So a lot of people say, I have this invention and I want to get a patent, right? But you really need to understand the reason for why you want a patent in the first place, right? And not think of your IP as an end goal, right? But a tool for you to capture a market, right? A tool for you to exist, right? Or for your business to exist in the marketplace that will generate revenue for you, right? So if you I'm sorry, I have a little puppy here, but but the idea that we want to work with is to think of IP as a tool, right, to help you maneuver and capture the market, right? So that's the idea. Right, so how do we generate revenue with IP? So Jackie Hatter is a really good friend. She's an IP strategist and patent attorney. And she's got this phrase that she says really often, right? People don't buy patents, right? People buy viable, validated ideas. So if you're thinking of, some of you here may have patents, but this doesn't just apply to patents. It applies to the different types of IP, right? That people will only pay you for your IP if it gives them something of value, right? People don't buy copyright for the sake of it, and people don't buy patents for the sake of it, right? People buy books, and people buy movies, right? And people buy inventions, and people buy solutions, right? So the IP that you have, should support that, right? It should support the solution. It should support those ideas. It should support those solutions, right? And I got this. I found this article from the in the Harvard Business Review that I did put up on the event page, and I really encourage you to read it, because it's a really good article that shows you how to think about IP in a way that generates revenue for you, as opposed to IP as just a legal document or just a legal right. Okay, so the example that the article gives, and this is a quote from the article, right, is Hitachi, right? So Hitachi is they manufacture technology, and they produce all kinds of products for the home, right? So the article says this: their automated airflow sensor would be easy for rivals to copy. There is nothing really groundbreaking with that technology, right? But the article then goes on to say the company has built such an effective patent wall around it, right, that rivals, their competitors, are forced to look for more complex and expensive, and therefore less competitive design approaches in their own airflow sensors. So what that means, that if you are thinking about getting a patent or any type of IP, you want to do it in such a way that or use it in such a way that it's cheaper for people to get a license from you than to invent or create around you, right? So I'm going to say that again, right? You want to make it cheaper for people to license your IP than for them to create or invent around you, so that they do not infringe your right, right? So if you can do that, then what we are looking at is an IP that is inherently valuable, right? So that's what we mean by that article, and I really encourage you to read it, because it gives you a really practical understanding of IP that conventionally only lawyers understood, right? Only you would think, okay, if I want to work with an IP, I need to consult a lawyer, right? But the lawyer should only be consulted once you've figured out the basic purpose of your IP in the market, right? So that's what I wanted to say with that. Right, so the two things about IP that I was just talking about just now is, number one, the value is really in understanding your market, right? What does your IP do in the market, right? And an IP is only valuable if there are people who are going to pay you a price for it. So because this whole series is for social entrepreneurs, right? To be financially sustainable, right? A lot of social entrepreneurs create IP, right? And to be financially sustainable, you need to create IP that is valuable. That means people must be willing to pay you for your IP, right? So that's one. And the second thing to understand is IP gives you a right to exclude others, right? So it doesn't give you a right to compete in the market, right? It doesn't give you a right to do something with the IP, right? That is your initiative, right? It's up to you to carve out your place in the market. It's up to you, to figure out how to get to generate value, right? Or to create value for your IP, right? What IP really does in terms of the law, right, is that it just gives you this right to exclude. It just tells you, right, it gives you the right to tell your competitor, right, that they cannot take away your customers, right? But the only reason why a competitor would want to take your customers is because your IP is valuable, right? So the IP doesn't give you your right, right? When you apply for a patent, when you apply or when you register your copyright, right, or your trademark, the only thing that the law does for you is give you this right to exclude, right? And if your IP is not valuable to begin with, then there's no point applying for those rights, right? Spending thousands of dollars getting a patent, right, just to get a right to exclude others when there's no value to your patent, right? So you want to really think about creating value to begin with, right? So the two things to bear in mind, right? And so so to address, a lot of people who have been coming to the events, right, the roundtable, are social entrepreneurs. And when you think about IP and you want to think about, well, how do I, ensure that my IP generates revenue, right? There are usually two problems, right? The first problem is you have a bunch of IP, a lot of patents, right? But they're not revenue generating, right? Or you've collected all this data, right? Or built algorithms, right? And then suddenly your funder withdraws funds, right? And you don't know what to do with your IP. If your IP is currently not generating revenue, right? You still want to capture that IP, right? Protect it and use it as a springboard to test new markets, right? How can you pivot, right? The business that you had that was based on this IP, right? How can you use that to change the direction of your business so that the IP, can then generate the revenue that it did not generate before, right? And it's so important that I have it here, right? That creativity and innovation is never wasted. So if you've been spending years, right, developing an algorithm, or you've been spending years, writing a book or producing a movie, and it has never generated revenue for you, right? What you want to do is pivot from that, right? How can you repackage the movie, right? Or how can you make use of the information in your book, right? Or how can you reposition your algorithm, right? Or your database that you've built, right? Or the technology that you've developed, right, in the market so that it becomes revenue generating, right? And for that, you need to study the market, not just the market that you originally had the product for, right? But you want to study and explore, connected markets, right? Markets around the original market. So that's one. The second group of people who might be coming with questions to this roundtable is, well, I'm planning on filing for IP. I haven't acquired IP yet, right? But I'm thinking of spending $10,000 to get a patent, or even filing fees, right, for trademarks and copyright. Before you do that, what you want to do is really understand your market and then figure out where can you provide value, right? And people in the market would pay you if you can provide them with a benefit, right? Which is you're giving them something that they did not have before, right? Or you have a solution to a problem, right? You can tell them how to solve a problem. That's when you derive value from your market, right? So having the IP itself, it's good to have the IP, but what I want to encourage you all to think about, right, and have this mindset shift, is not to just think of your IP as an end goal, right, but a tool to get you financially sustainable, right? So on that note, right, you want to understand the markets that you can serve, right? So if you look at really successful IP producers, right? Think Disney, for example, right? Not only do they produce the movie, right, for a streaming service, right? Those movies are released to the same cinema, right? At least this was before COVID, right? They would release the movies and they would have cinematic releases. Then they would have merchandise, right? And they would have books out of that movie, right? Not only books, but they would also have toys and all kinds of things, right? So you want to think about the parallel markets that your IP can serve, right? And not limit yourself to just one application, right? Or one narrow market, right? So that's that. Let me see. Right. So having said that, those were my preliminary remarks. And I wanted to invite you to, participate in a discussion by having you tell us who you are, what do you do, right? How has IP worked for you and your organization, right? And then I guess the more important conversation is what isn't working or what hasn't worked, right? And let's see if we can brainstorm and see if we can find solutions to the third question, right? So who are you? What do you do? How has IP worked for you? And what isn't working or hasn't worked? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my slides and then we can have a roundtable discussion. Okay, so who are you? Who are you and what do you do? How has IP worked and how has IP not worked? What isn't working? Let me go to the chat and see if there's a question there. Okay, so there are some general questions that are asked that I can answer. So Rosalind say, interesting. What states protect ideas? All states. So every state will have its own what we call common law rules, right? So they may have a statute that actually explicitly protects ideas. But if a state doesn't protect ideas explicitly, then the courts, if you bring an action for someone stealing your idea, what the court will do is rely on basic property principles and contract law. So it's, have you disclosed anything and have you provided the idea as a consideration, right? And if you have, then maybe there's an implied contract there, right? Or if your idea sufficiently proprietary enough that we can protect it as a property right. Yeah, so all states will have their own unique way of protecting ideas. I think, if I'm not wrong, some states, and I want to say California, I think has some explicit provision, right? But But if not, then it's just a common law, basic common law principles. So hold on, let me see. And then Dawn said, will the recording be available as a replay? Yes. So if you've registered for the event, I usually record the video and then send it out to people who register for the event. So I'm also seeing that people are putting in their information in the chat, and then that's something that I forgot to mention earlier, that I want to really encourage you guys to connect with each other, right? So one of the reasons why I'm having this event is really to build community, right? To connect with each other on LinkedIn. And then at the end, I'll mention that I've been thinking a lot about building a community and using Kajabi as a platform to build that community. I'll talk about it in a little bit. So Maynard, I've been talking to Maynard on LinkedIn, and he does he did, I guess he invents, and Maynard, if you're there, you can talk a little bit about what you do. But you design and develop vegetarian or vegan-based food, I think, right? So if that's something that you would be interested, anyone here would be interested in, please connect with Maynard. There is another question, Funmi. Funmi, do you want to unmute yourself and ask that question?
Yeah, my question is, I have a UK patent, and I just wondered if anybody can, because I don't have a worldwide patent, can anybody copy it anywhere else in the world?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the unfortunate thing about IP is that if you don't register in the country that you want protection in, then the IP is susceptible to piracy. So with a UK patent, I don't know when you actually applied for the patent, but if it's within a year, you can actually get an international, I wouldn't call it an international, but you can get it. It's not an international patent, but it's an international application, right? So you would then go back to the patent office and say, I want a patent in the US, I want a patent in Japan, and identify all the countries that you want a patent in. And then from there, the patent office is going to apply to these other countries for protection, right? So that's through the PCT, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, but that's what you want to do, right? And your question is, does that mean that someone in the US can copy my designs? The quick answer is yes. Even if those designs are protected with a patent, right? So if those designs are not even, it depends on how you've drafted your patent. So if the patent doesn't cover those designs, then those designs would then be susceptible to infringement. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so we have quite a good crowd here. So do you guys have any questions about what I just said, or you want me to go on and
I have a quick question. So this has been great. It's really wonderful. I'm doing the test marketing at this point with a new course that I'm launching. So I'm trying to figure out the popularity, the audience, making sure that I have that honed in. But I'd like to take the online course and then market it individually to corporate.
Mm-hmm.
What type of trademark do I need so that when I am selling to corporate, that they don't just purchase one course, but they pay me for the individual courses that each employee utilizes?
Yeah. So you're really not asking, you're not really asking a trademark question. What you're asking is, well, how do I package the cost in a way that the corporation would pay for it, right? Individually or in a package. The trademark question only comes about when, and this is what I really think from a practical perspective, it only becomes an issue when you've established yourself, right? Until you have a market, I wouldn't, that's not where you should be spending your resources or your energy figuring out how to get a trademark, right? Because a trademark, well, the law says that a trademark will only be granted if it's used in commerce, right? And if it's used in commerce, until you have a brand recognition, right, where people is going to take away, or people is going to, I guess, represent your brand, so let's just say you're this established author and promoter of DEI in the marketplace. Everyone knows Dr. Colleen, right? Then you have a brand around you that people will want to pirate, to copy. You know what I mean? Right? No one's going to want to copy someone who's not known. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So there's no point wasting energy or resources getting a trademark until you've built up that market. So,
Okay,
so if you're thinking of, building a course that individuals can then buy and then turning it around and then selling to corporations, you need a good product, right? But you don't need a brand to do that. Do you know what I mean? People will pay you for a good product as opposed to a brand. And you can have, a not so great brand, right? And an awesome product, people will still pay you for it. Right?
Okay.
And but if you have a lousy product and a great brand, no one's going to buy it, right? Like the product has to commensurate with the brand value. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that puts my mind at ease. I appreciate it. This way I'm not having to go the trademark route just yet.
Not yet. Yeah. Yeah, like we are willing to spend like $2,000, $3,000 on an Apple computer, not because it's Apple. I mean, it partly because it's Apple, but Apple has built their brand by producing great products. So you want to start with your product first, and then the IP is a tool to ensure that you capture the market. Does that make sense? Because it's a right to exclude, right? It doesn't give you anything more than to exclude competitors. Yeah, and IP scholars really understand this, right? That an intellectual property is just a right to exclude your competitor.
Can I add something?
Yeah. So, Christoph.
Yeah. So my view is a little bit different on that. It depends on which industry you're in, right?
Yeah.
So I think a trademark is much more important in the service sector. If you like, you described educate and do courses, it might be more important than a patent that might take you 3 years to get.
Yeah.
The same is true with regard to technology and to fintech, for example. So it really depends on the context, and the right to use or to use in commerce. The requirements are quite low. So if you basically have a website running with your name, you could basically try to get a trademark. You can also apply for an intent to use. So there are different ways to look at it, but I think there is not one answer that fits all. But I think what Alina says is so true in terms of your product and the market. You have to do your research first before you invest. And that's also, by the way, an area where a lot of entrepreneurs are taken advantage of, because there are businesses out there who want to help you with your patents and you want to help you with registering your IP. But in reality, they just want to make money off of you without really supporting your idea or helping you develop a market or a product. So in that sense, I think that's important to just mention as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So Christoph is a law professor as well, and he teaches. He does a lot of work. Christoph, correct me. if I'm misrepresenting it, but he does a lot of work with startups, and does a lot of advisory work there. And he's got a great point in that if you do intend to use a trademark, you can actually file for an intent to use, and then you have to use it within I think within 2 years, I think, or is it a year?
I bet you can always extend it, but it's
Yeah.
2 years. And
If I'm not wrong, I think, Christoph, I think it's 6 months, right? 6 months, and then you renew it, and you can renew it for up to 24 months, I think.
exactly, that's it.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of look at this, and in terms of the earlier question too, about international patents or IP protection from the UK, it's more difficult that now after Brexit, obviously. But the international patents don't give you the equivalent protection that you would get in the UK or in the United States if you individually apply for patent protection. But of course, this not only costs a lot of money, it also takes a lot of time. So it's really questionable whether that always is helpful unless you really have a product that can be licensed the way Alina described it in the beginning, and then it's certainly worth investing in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think Funmi, Christoph is originally from Germany, so he understands the EU system pretty well, and he's right in that before Brexit, you can just apply for a single EU patent. But I think Funmi's question is for countries outside the EU, I think, because the question is, if she has a UK patent, does that mean that anyone in the US can copy her designs? And that would still mean having to apply to the US for a patent through the PCT if you're based in the UK. Aaron, I've known Aaron for a long time. Aaron, do you want to talk a bit about what you do, and then you can tell us about the question that you were asking?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the event, first of all, Lena. Happy to be here. So I've got an engineering So I have an engineering background, and law to engineers, it looks totally different than what law looks to like family court practitioners and policymakers. So we do what we call constructive child safety files for the children in the community who are going through some kind of legal severance issue, like a high conflict divorce or really toxic parental separation ordeal. And we get good, clean, organic data out of this, and it really seems to impact the children's lives for a long period of time. But the problem we have, the community loves it, especially people who can't afford a lawyer and like family court and really need the extra help. They love it because it's all a free community service, and it seems to add value to their lives. Of course, they can't always pay for it. But then on the political side of it, there's no room in, say, family court for scientific type data, or within county board resolutions where they have so much caucus politics going back and forth, even at the state level. So it's hard to introduce this kind of data into policymakers' worlds. So that's the good and the bad of our kind of IP.
Yeah, so the challenging thing is for you, I think, Aaron, is why do you want that IP validated by the court?
Because I think it could help make more accurate decisions, see protocols that are a little bit easier on the children. For example, one case, a little girl named Madison went through, one parent had an attorney and the other didn't. So that the side with the attorney just continued the case for 2 years, trying to get the other side to submit. And during that 2 years, there was no visitations in black and white on paper. So she went that long without seeing one of her parents, and the court could see that data and see, well, maybe this wasn't the best thing for that little girl. Maybe one parent missed all her sporting events or her school schedules and her extracurricular activities. Whereas if we limited those continuances to say 6 months or something, then that would be a little bit safer for the children. But there's no way to introduce that type of data into the county court policy or state legislators.
And I know exactly what you do. So for those in on the call, what Aaron is trying to do is, I guess, protect the children of families that are breaking up. And he's got a lot of materials, and with his scientific background, what he's done is collected a lot of data about the impact of a broken family on children. And he's trying to convince the courts to change the way they deal with domestic cases, and take a more protective approach to children. Right? Correct me if that's in somewhat what you're working on.
Yep. That's a good way to put it. And I think that's why there is so much data now, is because there's been no place for it to go.
Exactly.
No practical place to apply that data.
Exactly. Which I think you're doing such good work in that system. But I wanted to kind of highlight again the point that I was making earlier, right? Even if you have data, even if you have information, even if you have materials that deserve an IP, it doesn't give you the right to use it and to get people on board with the information you have, right? Which brings me back to the point that it's such a difficult mindset shift, because we always think of IP as a right, and it to a large extent it's a right, but it's a right that allows you to exclude others, as opposed to convincing people to use your product. Do you see the difference? And
Yes.
it's a difficult mindset shift to make, because we've always thought about an IP as an end goal. Once I get the IP, then all my problems are solved, right? But that's not the case. Getting the patent doesn't give you the market. Right? Getting the patent excludes other competitors from coming into your market. You see the difference? Right? Which means which brings me back to my point that if you are a social entrepreneur and you're looking to be financially sustainable, you need to focus on creating value first. Then let's worry about getting the right. But until you do that, we can talk about the legalities, what we need to do, but until you create that value, until you really understand your role in the market, from a practical perspective, you don't need to worry too much about an IP. So back to what Christoph was saying, I think, and Christoph, you can jump in anytime, but if you are going to use a trademark, you would only have a reason to file for an ITU and intent to use once there's traction. You know what I mean? Once people are paying you for your product, then you say, okay, yeah, there is potential to this, and we can grow. Then you would say, okay, how do I make sure that my place in the market is protected? Then you start thinking about a trademark, and then maybe at that point you file for an intent to use. But until then, until you've created value and gotten that traction, you're wasting your energy and time and money thinking about IP. Right? So it's something you think about, like put it on a side note, right? Think about trademarks or think about patent. But until you have something valuable, you don't need to worry about that yet, right? And then when you have something valuable, then you protect it, then you can start generating revenue because you are excluding your competitors. Does that make sense?
So I would just add something then. I think this is right? I don't exactly understand how you want to protect these children, and whether it's just about protecting the data or convincing the courts to use a specific system. But what it sounds to me like is that that you already are in the market and are doing what you want to do, right? So you probably have already an established reputation to some degree. You just want to make it maybe easier, if I understood this correctly earlier, to be utilized. But I think at that point, you don't necessarily have to just, as Alina said, worry about necessarily the trademark, but more the convincing part. But where this kind of circles around a bit, at least in my opinion, is I think for sustainability and for social enterprises, the trademarks can be quite important and significant in terms of the name, right? Because of name recognition. But at the same time, there are other things that you can utilize too. You can use certifications and seals, certain seals of business. I mean, there are many examples, but I think it really depends on, again, where you are at and what you want to do. And I don't know if necessarily a trademark where you are at will be extra or additional revenue producing for you. But in order to really look at this, I would have to have more information, but it's quite interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Christoph. Yeah, Aaron is really cool. He's working on so many cool projects. So again, I encourage you guys to connect with each other, and you can connect with each other on LinkedIn for now until we get a nice community platform that everyone can use. So Maynard has been putting a lot of information on the chat. So Maynard, he is a former professor at the Harvard Medical School, and he does a lot of he does a lot of fascinating work. And I've been encouraging to introduce himself, but I guess oh, Maynard says no. Maynard, tell us a bit about yourself, and his post about Wikipedia here is spot on. Maynard, would you like to unmute and oh, you cannot.
I have something else going on in the background, so I cannot talk. However, these are just questions I have along the way. So maybe at a later time, you can look at those questions and think about them. Maybe I should have just sent them to you through LinkedIn or by email. But I was concerned with things like gene modification and things in industrial technology where rights are granted, and maybe can a government or a court decide to renege on that license and say, well, that IP right was not granted properly.
Yeah.
I guess that is the case.
Yeah. So Maynard, yeah, so that's a great question, and I wasn't planning for that discussion in this talk because I wanted to focus on how IP can generate revenue for social entrepreneurs. But that's a really good question. So Maynard's issue is what if you get an IP on something that should not be granted an IP? Like in the example he gives is genetically modified organisms, right? And yeah, the courts have granted IP in genetically modified organisms. I think Dolly the sheep, right, had an IP is patented. The Harvard OncoMouse is patented, and the question is, should we allow those kind of things like genetically modified animals to be, property and protected with an IP right? So if you're a social entrepreneur, you probably don't have to worry about that unless you are, in one of these controversial industries. But as a general rule, it is a controversy. Like in EU, right? So Christoph, I'm sure will have a lot more to say about this. But like in EU, one of the reasons to exclude certain things from patentability is the morality of it, right? If it's not moral or immoral to patent something, in Europe you don't get a patent. But morality is not a question that is one of it's not a qualifying question in the US, right? So in the US, if you can show that your patent meets certain requirements, right, you get a patent, right? There is nothing in US law that excludes inventions that are immoral, right? Unless it's grossly immoral, like if you build a nuclear bomb, obviously you cannot get a patent, right? But for things like that are on borderline, bioethics, fun conversation, exactly, right? But on borderline inventions, right? The US has granted patents over borderline, inventions. Yes, it's a serious question, because you want to ask yourself whether, number one, those kind of things should be protected with a right to exclude, right? Do we even protect those kind of things with a property right? And if we do, what are the repercussions, right, long term, right? So if long term it affects innovation, or it affects how society is going to develop as a result of that patent, it's something we definitely want to explore in review, right? So so that's a really good question, that people have, you can do a PhD in that question. So we'll address that in an academic paper. Christoph, you had something to say?
Let me just try.
Yeah.
Just.
Oh, Christoph, you're
This is interesting for this discussion here, right?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
You're kind of cutting in and out.
Yeah, it's my connection.
Yeah,
it's my connection. So
it's okay. Say.
So just real quick, maybe it comes through. This discussion is very similar now in the data field, right? The question is who owns what, and whose property is the data, the raw data, and how it's then manipulated and utilized, right? And in that sense, it might become an issue with social enterprises as well. But the other important thing is, the question is, why do I need a patent on something like this, right? For the genetic modification. If I need it for something really quickly, like the coronavirus vaccine, then I don't necessarily need that protection, right?
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for another time. But I think it kind of at least borders on some of the things.
Yeah, I think we're losing Christoph. Christoph is actually on the road. He's driving from Chicago, I think back down to Mississippi. So when he said that he would attend, he said that I might be going through Missouri at that time. So that's why he's cutting in and out. But what he says is quite true, in that those kind of questions, you want to see I guess the thing we want to think about is whether it makes sense to apply for an IP, right? And many times, if I see Alex. Hi, Alex. And he's smiling because Alex has applied for a couple of patents internationally as well. But the question is, you want to ask yourself whether it makes sense to get a patent or an IP right at this point for your business. That's the thing you have to figure out. And to be honest, right, I'm a law professor, so I think about law all the time. But that's not a legal question, right? It's a business question, right? Whether you apply for a patent, whether you get a copyright or brand your business, it's a business question, and it's more a business question and less a legal question, right? It becomes legal. The question becomes legal, and you will know that it's a legal question when you realize that you have a market that you want to protect. Then that's when you know, okay, it's becoming a legal question. But until then, it's a business question that you have to figure out, right? So I hope that makes sense. So one last question before we wrap it up. I want to talk a little bit about what the plan is going forward now that we're kind of at the end of the summer series. So I wanted to address Maynard's question. He said that does regulation follow the exclusive right to develop it? Harvard faculty are taught by the institution to negotiate with the publisher for unlimited and non-exclusive rights to their IP, so that they can use it for example, teaching, interviews, further R&D. And the answer is it's less a regulation. So when you have an exclusive right, what happens is then you are in a position to negotiate, right? So until you have a patent or a copyright or an IP right, that legal right, you're not in any position to negotiate with a publisher, right? A publisher would only talk to you, or a venture capitalist will only talk to you if you can show that you have IP that can potentially generate revenue for them, right? So when you have IP, what happens is it puts you in a position where you can then negotiate, right? And if you can then negotiate with the publisher, then you want to make sure what you're saying here is that Harvard is telling you that you want to make sure that you retain some rights to your IP, so that you have some room to then have interviews, to teach, and do other things with it. In other words, do not license your entire right away. Do not assign your right, and in other words, don't sell your entire right. Retain some rights for yourself, so that you can do all these things, which is teach and do more R&D. If I want to publish something that can be profitable now for a publisher, but not for me, I may want the publisher to make it public, but retaining rights to publish or develop later. Yeah, you obviously can, right? So you would grant the publisher a non-exclusive right. And it happens all the time, right? So it depends on, again, it's a business question that you have to figure out, right? So J.K. Rowling, right? She wants to grant Warner Brothers the right to make Harry Potter into a movie, right? The question is, what kind of right would Warner Brother want, right? And whether they can pay her enough so that she would agree to license it to an exclusive license, right? So if Warner Brother is saying we want the exclusive right to make Harry Potter, right? They would have to pay her enough so that J.K. Rowling doesn't go to, another movie producer to then produce a competing movie. Does that make sense? Right? So it's a business decision, right? And it boils down to basic contracts, right? Who is in a stronger bargaining position, right? So if the publisher is in a stronger bargaining position, they may say they want the exclusive right, and if that's the case, then you might have to grant the exclusive right. But having said that, most publishers are not like that, right? I don't know of a publisher that would say, give me all your rights and you don't have the right to then do R&D, right? No publisher would say that. Definitely not the academic publishers, right? So usually with publications, what happens is the publisher gets the right to print and distribute and all that, right? And you retain the right to further develop the work and all that. It's never, or I wouldn't say never, but it's very seldom, right? An outward assignment of that right. Does that make sense, Maynard? I hope that answers the question. Okay, Alex has a question. So Alex, you want to say, how about the SDGs and IP? I love that question, Maynard. I want to address that, but maybe not in this roundtable. Maybe we'll do a follow-up roundtable on just the SDGs and the IP. I love that question. So Alex, do you want to have a really quick answer, and then I want to wrap this up?
Sure. So hi everybody. I have one very simple question. What do you think about open source? So Alina is already familiar what we are working here at TGI, and lately we are thinking about going open source with our innovation, and the innovation in question is related to green tech, to energy efficiency and so on, to HVAC industry in general. Something like Elon Musk is doing currently, and we already done it like 10 years ago. So we want to beat him to the punch. So my question is very simple. How do you open source innovation in a way it can benefit everybody, like organization, and also the communities all around the world?
That you mentioned here. Can you hear me, Alina?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay, so I mean, you couldn't see it. I was also smiling when you asked that question, right? I think open source is very important, especially in social enterprising and sustainability. But it goes exactly to the heart of the discussion here. If you have an outstanding, unique product, you can make that open source, right? And if this is combined with certain IP protection, for example, trademarks, to be recognizable, then I think it can be utilized like this, and it doesn't necessarily need the more traditional protection. And you can also see that open source is used in many other sectors of the industry. In the financial world, a lot of open source are used, and open source will also be tremendously important in terms of corporate and business law when we're talking about blockchain and interoperabilities, right? So I think this is a key subject and issue, and probably the most important in terms of social enterprising, and especially if you're thinking about helping other entrepreneurs or other people who cannot necessarily afford to pay for a named product.
Yeah. And that's a good, the last sentence that Christoph said was really good. If you have an IP, it's up to you how you want to use it. And if it makes more business sense for you, Alex, and I know your outlook on the world, if it makes more business and I guess moral, ethical sense for you to do it open source, it's really up to you, which means what you're doing is you are waiving your IP. I'm not going to enforce my IP, and I'm going to make this available to you. But again, it's a business decision that you make. It's both a business and ethical decision that you would make.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Alina. It's if I may just a second, it's like a moral dilemma, because the innovation part is really cool. It's great. And it's scalable throughout industries. That's not the problem. We already had, I cannot go into details. We already had a couple of offers to sell it, but I'm reluctant to sell it. I'm more open to offer it to everybody, even at the price point that we might not earn, substantial income. But that was the question, basically, how to leverage some type of income compared to doing, let's call it, good,
Yeah.
Just real quick, just once, real quick. So the way you can do this is the way, for example, Apple does this for Apple developers and other tech platforms, where they give certain things open source and other things they maintain or keep or protect. So you can do it that way. So there are ways to do that, but it really depends again on how far you want to go, and if you want to let everything go out and waive all your rights, or whether you want to do this just in segments.
Well, that's a great thing to say. The point is, we already have another product that is even better than the first one. So we want to attract enough attention with this first one and offer it to the public, and waive our entire IP rights, but if there is a possibility to at least gain something in return, because we invested heavily into R&D in this 10 years, you know, we would be happy. I mean, the board would be happy. Me personally, I'm not into money too much.
Alex, I'll talk to you. I put my calendar in the chat. Find some time. I'll work with you on that.
Sure. Thank you, Christoph.
Yeah, and thanks. But I want to be really respectful of everyone's time, and I just want to visit like 2 minutes just to wrap up. But I have my bye, Claudia. See you real soon. But I have my calendar here, right? If you want, find some time to talk with me. But let me see. I wanted to just wrap it up with what's going to happen now. So we've been having this summer series, and the one on the 23rd, 2 weeks from today, on how to build a successful social enterprise, is the last one in the summer series. Like, so I've planned like a six event series over the summer, just to highlight some of the issues that social entrepreneurs face and to provide some solutions, right? So our mission is really to empower social entrepreneurs, right? So that they can, through their business, impact society and the planet in positive ways, right? So this is the mission. Originally, it was really to bridge academia with business. But as we grew, we're starting to attract not just people in academia, but also funders, philanthropists, investors. So what we're trying to do is build a community where people can interact with one goal in mind: how to make society and the planet better through business practices, right? So to that end, we will be working on, actually we're ready to launch a couple of programs and products to that end, but also this is the general mission. So the last one that I want to invite everyone to is the last roundtable is on building a successful social enterprise, which I guess, Alex, the question that you were asking actually dovetails right into this issue, right? How do you make the decision between being profitable and being sustainable, right? And making ethical decisions. So that's the topic that we will be addressing on the 23rd. Right, and once the intention with the events really was to actually, set the framework, right, or the launch pad, so that everyone who's been attending these events will have ideas to then go out and make the impact, right? But the events have gone really well, and so what I've worked on is to build up a Changemaker community that I want to invite all of you to, right? So this is free. There's no obligation, no commitment, but it will build the community of people who have been coming to the events, so that everything can be in one place, right? So if you are searching for a article, you can go here, and that's my plan. And I will be uploading all the videos from the events onto the community. So this is up. There's nothing in it yet, but this is up. And if you want to go ahead and join, you can. This is the link to join. So you can sign up for free. And just to put this on your calendar, right? What does it? How do we build a successful social enterprise, right? So this is going to tie back to the very first event, where the issue is, number one, how do we create the impact that you want? And number two, how do you be financially sustainable, right? And we'll address that issue in this event. So I want to say thank you. You have my calendar. Connect with me if we can help you in any way, right? And then if you're interested in what it would look like to work with the Changemaker Institute, get in touch with us as well. And also do join the community. Okay, so I'll put the link on the event page as well. So I want to say again, thank you for being here. And thank you. So thanks, Colleen. Thanks, Aaron, Lucian, Samuel, Alex, for being here. And it's nice to meet the rest of you. Maynard, we haven't met before till today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for this event. Thank you so much.
No problem. We'll talk again soon. See you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.